There are people who reach the end of their lives and realize with a brutal clarity that only comes when there's no time left that they never truly knew themselves. They spent decades being the version their parents needed, the version their partner expected, the version their colleagues tolerated, the version society approved. They built an entire existence around a borrowed identity, and only when death showed them its true face did they understand they had wasted the only gift that's truly irretrievable, the chance to discover who they could have been. The most devastating part isn't that they died without fulfilling their dreams. That's almost trivial. What's devastating is that they died without even knowing what their dreams truly were, because they never had the courage to stop being who they thought they had to be. That is the true horror of an unlived life, not failure. The complete absence of an authentic attempt. Stop for a moment and think about this. How many versions of yourself have you abandoned along the way? I'm not talking about grandiose dreams or impossible fantasies. I'm talking about those promises you made to yourself in moments of clarity. Those commitments you made when you felt something had to change. That version of you who would wake up early, who would read more, who would have deeper conversations with the people they love, who wouldn't postpone what matters. That version exists, or at least existed as a possibility, and you abandoned it, not because you lacked capability, but because of something far more subtle and devastating: loyalty to your old version. Because here's what nobody tells you about change. Transformation doesn't begin when you find new motivation or discover a revolutionary technique. Transformation begins when you decide to betray the person you've been. And I use that word betrayal deliberately, because your current identity, with all its flaws and limitations, has become something familiar, something predictable. Your mind has built a complete system of beliefs, habits, and thought patterns that sustain that identity. Changing means dismantling that system, and your psyche will resist with a ferocity that will surprise you. Psychologists who study behavioral change have identified something fascinating. It's not external circumstances that keep us trapped in destructive patterns. It's our need for internal consistency. There's a fundamental concept in cognitive psychology that explains why transformation is so difficult. When we act inconsistently with our self-image, we experience a deep, almost physical discomfort. It's as if every cell in our body protests. This isn't who we are. And most people, when faced with that discomfort, retreat. They return to the comfort of the familiar, even if the familiar is miserable. But here's the secret that changes everything. That discomfort isn't a signal that you're wrong. It's the signal that you're growing. It's the price of admission to a new version of yourself. And if you can hold that discomfort without fleeing, without rationalizing it, without seeking an easy way out, something extraordinary begins to happen. Your identity starts to reorganize around your new actions. What feels impossible at first gradually becomes your new normal. But this process requires something our contemporary culture has forgotten how to cultivate: the capacity to tolerate discomfort without collapsing. Let me explain how change really works, because this is crucial. There's a fundamental difference between two types of desire for transformation. The first is the desire for results. I want to be fit. I want to be successful. I want meaningful relationships. This type of desire is common and practically useless because it's oriented toward an imaginary future while ignoring the present. The second type of desire is much rarer and exponentially more powerful. It's the desire to become the type of person who naturally produces those results, not wanting the fit body, but becoming someone who values and enjoys movement, not wanting success, but becoming someone who does the work with excellence even when nobody's watching. See the difference? A person who simply wants results is constantly fighting against their nature. A person who has transformed their identity is living from their nature, and this is where most attempts at change fail. We try to modify behavior without touching the identity that generates it. It's like trying to change the fruit without changing the tree. You can pick off some rotten apples, but the tree will keep producing the same type of fruit. True transformation doesn't occur at the level of behavior. It occurs at the level of identity, in that deep layer where your beliefs about who you fundamentally are reside. The ancient Greek philosophers understood this better than we do. They didn't talk about goals or objectives the way we do now. They spoke of arete, which translates poorly as virtue or excellence, but really means becoming the fullest expression of what you're capable of being. It wasn't about achieving things, it was about becoming someone. And they understood something we've forgotten, that the process of becoming that person requires the deliberate death of who you are now. This sounds dramatic, but it's literally true. Think about the sentences you use to describe who you are. I'm someone who's always late. I'm bad with numbers. I'm shy. I'm impulsive. Each of these sentences is a prison disguised as a description. They're not neutral facts about your nature. They're stories you've told so many times they've solidified into identity. And as long as you keep telling those stories, as long as you keep identifying with those limitations, you'll remain trapped in them. Transformation demands that you release those stories, that you're willing to not know who you are for a while, to exist in that uncomfortable space between who you were and who you're becoming. But There's something deeper here, something that goes beyond personal benefit, because the decision to transform isn't just about you. Every person exists within a network of relationships, a constellation of human connections. And when you remain stuck in your old version, you don't just limit yourself, you limit everyone in your orbit. Your partner doesn't have access to the version of you that could be more present, more conscious, more capable of real intimacy. Your children don't have the model of what's possible when someone decides to grow beyond their limitations. Your colleagues don't benefit from the contributions you could make if you operated from your full potential. Your community loses what only you could offer if you became who you're truly capable of being. There's a concept in moral philosophy worth considering, the idea that we have obligations not just to others but to the possible versions of ourselves. Each of us exists as a series of potentialities, and living ethically means honoring those potentialities, not wasting them. When we choose comfort over growth, when we choose familiarity over transformation, we're not just making a neutral personal decision, we're committing a kind of existential betrayal against what we could become. And this is what makes transformation so urgent. Time is the only resource you can't recover. Every day that passes being your old version is a day that will never return. I'm not trying to create panic or anxiety. I'm pointing out a simple mathematical truth. Your life has temporal limits, and every moment you dedicate to patterns that don't serve you is a moment stolen from the person you could become. Procrastination isn't just postponing tasks, it's postponing your own evolution. And the cost of that isn't measured in days or months, it's measured in the version of life you never got to live. So what does it really take to transform yourself? It's not about heroic willpower or superhuman discipline. It's about something much more fundamental. It's about making a decision, a real decision, not a preference or a desire or a vague hope, but an unwavering decision that the person you've been until now is not the person you'll be in the future. And then, and this is crucial, it's about beginning to accumulate evidence for that new identity. Here's how this works in practice. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you are. Every time you do what you said you would do, you're voting to be reliable. Every time you choose the difficult over the easy, you're voting to be disciplined. Every time you act with integrity when nobody's watching, you're voting to be a person of integrity. And your identity is nothing more than the result of these accumulated choices. You don't need to win every vote. You don't need to be perfect, but you need to win the majority. And you need to keep voting day after day until the new identity is stronger than the old one. Researchers who study habit formation have discovered something revealing. Lasting change doesn't come from dramatic events, but from the accumulation of small, consistent actions. There's a reason this is true, and it has to do with how your brain works. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine. It's constantly observing what you do and using that to predict who you are and what you'll do next. When you start behaving differently, consistently, your brain eventually updates its model of who you are. But this takes time. It requires repetition. It requires that you keep showing up as your new version even when your old version is screaming for you to come back home. And here's the hardest moment in any transformation process: the valley of disillusionment. There's a period, usually between 3 weeks and 3 months after starting a change, where the initial enthusiasm has faded, but visible results haven't arrived yet. Your old version is very present, whispering to you that nothing has really changed, that you're the same as always, that this is useless. This is the moment where most people quit. They return to their old patterns and use their failure as evidence that change isn't possible for them. But what they don't understand is that this valley isn't a sign of failure. It's a necessary phase of the process. It's the period where transformation is happening beneath the surface. Invisible but real. It's where your new identity is being forged in the fire of consistent repetition. If you can cross this valley, if you can keep acting like your new version, even when there's no visible evidence it's working, something miraculous happens. One day you wake up and realize you're no longer pretending. You're no longer acting as if you were this new person. You've become this person. Transformation is no longer something you're trying to do. It's something that has already happened. And when you reach that point, change becomes effortless because you're no longer fighting against your nature. You've changed your nature. But let me be clear about something. This transformation doesn't mean you become someone you're not. It's not about imitating another person or conforming to some external ideal of what you should be. It's about removing the layers of conditioning, fear, and self-imposed limitations to reveal who you've been capable of being all along. There's a crucial difference between becoming someone authentic and remaining stuck in a limited version of yourself under the pretense of authenticity. Because here's the most insidious deception our mind uses to keep us small. It tells us that changing would be inauthentic, that it would be betraying our true nature. But your true nature isn't your worst habits. Your true nature isn't your defense mechanisms or your reactive patterns. Your true nature is your capacity for growth, your undeveloped potential, the fullest version of you that hasn't yet emerged. Staying small isn't authentic. It's cowardice disguised as self-acceptance. And here's another uncomfortable truth. You can't transform yourself and keep all your relationships exactly as they are. When you change fundamentally, some people in your life won't recognize the new version of you. Some will feel threatened by your growth because it reminds them of their own stagnation. Some will actively try to sabotage your transformation because your old version was more comfortable, more predictable, easier to manipulate. This is painful, but it's inevitable. Real transformation requires that you're willing to let some relationships evolve or end. You can't become a new person and expect everyone to follow you. Some will, others won't. And that's okay. In fact, it's necessary. But the opposite is also true. When you transform, you naturally attract new relationships that align with who you're becoming. You find people who recognize you in your new version, who see you not as you were, but as you are now. And these relationships have a different quality, a different depth, because they're based on your emerging self, not your historical self. This is one of the most beautiful gifts of transformation. You discover that there were people waiting for you in your new version, people you never would have connected with from your old version. There's something else about transformation you need to understand. It's not a one-time event. There's no moment where you arrive and can stop. Transformation is a continuous process of death and rebirth, of releasing old versions and emerging into new ones. The person you become today will eventually need to transform again. And this is something beautiful, not something frightening. It means you're never stuck, never finished. You always have the capacity to evolve beyond who you are now. The great spiritual masters of various traditions have spoken about this using different languages. They talk about dying before you die, about the second birth, about rebirth. And although their conceptual frameworks differ, they're all pointing to the same truth, that the human being has a unique capacity for conscious self-transformation. We're not fixed in our form like other creatures are. We have the ability to observe ourselves, judge ourselves, and deliberately become something different. This is perhaps the most distinctive feature of being human, and most people waste it completely. Think about this. Of all the capacities you possess, of all the gifts you were born with, the most powerful is your capacity to change who you are, not your capacity to make money, not your intelligence, not your talent, your capacity for transformation. Because everything else in your life flows from who you are fundamentally. If you change who you are, you change what's possible for you. If you change who you are, you change how you experience every moment of your life. If you change who you are, you change the impact you have on everyone around you. So here's the question you need to answer. Not for me, but for yourself. Are you willing to let your old version die? Are you willing to release the stories you've told about who you are? Are you willing to go through the discomfort of not knowing who you are for a while? Are you willing to disappoint the people who prefer your old version? Are you willing to do the work day after day, even when you don't see immediate results? Because if the answer is yes, if you're truly willing, then everything changes. Not immediately, not magically, but inevitably. Because once you make that real decision, once you genuinely commit to your own transformation, you've set in motion a process that cannot be stopped. Every action you take from that commitment moves you further from who you were and closer to who you could be. And over time, the gap between those two versions closes, not because your potential version has descended to meet you, but because you've risen to meet it. And when you finally find yourself living from that new version of yourself, when you look back and see how far you've come, you'll understand something profound, that the person you were before wasn't less valuable or less worthy. They were simply less complete. They were an earlier version, a necessary iteration on your path to becoming who you were meant to be. And with that understanding comes a deep compassion, both for your former self and for all the other people who are still trapped in their old versions, waiting for the moment when they'll finally be ready to transform. Transformation begins when you stop being your old version, not when you wish for it, not when you plan it, not when you talk about it. It begins when you make the decision that that version has served its purpose and no longer serves you. It begins when you're willing to step into the unknown without guarantees. It begins when you value your potential more than your comfort. And once it truly begins, you discover that the distance between who you are and who you could be wasn't as vast as you thought. It was just that you had never taken the first step. That step is available to you now. It always has been. The question is, will you take it?